Greetings and welcome to Vast Debatable. Vast Debatable is a film and television debate show. I'm your host, Sat Nyangi, and off screen I got two additional judges. The first one is Simeon Sims, the host of Queer Essential.
Hello, hey.
Alright, and the second judge, she's the fact checker. She is a boot buster. She is Tarmim.
Bonjour.
Okay, we've been all international, that's kind of cute. We have here today two gladiators ready to duke it out, ready to state their opinion even if you don't care. On my left, he is the owner of Andromeda Video Game Marketing. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Sam. He does not give a shh, Jude.
Hello there.
On my right, he is a researcher at a TV production company. He is a former podcaster of Late Night Niche, and everyone's a critic. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Joe Steve.
Lovely to be here, sir.
All right. Decorum, I like that. It's kind of nice. Now, Vast Debatable is a best of three. Round 1 and 2 is 7 minutes. I'll give each of you guys an opportunity to introduce the films, but then after that, Tamim off screen is going to start the count, and you guys will debate your points. Round 3 is the wild card round. It's different from round 1 and 2. It's only for 1 minute, so I'm going to give you the question on the spot. You'll have a minute to think of your argument and a minute each to debate your point. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Let's start this. Round 1. What is the best time travel film? We're going to go alphabetical order. Joe, what did you pick?
I picked The Butterfly Effect. And can I introduce it?
Yes.
Yeah. So, for those of you judging, and for those of you at home who haven't seen it, the basic premise is Ashton Kutcher is a young man who had a pretty traumatic childhood, and he attempts to go back in time, through his diaries that he's been making through his whole life, and tries to change his life and the people around him's life. And things keep on backfiring, and the premise is change one thing and everything changes. So the butterfly effect. Butterfly flaps its wings, can cause a hurricane somewhere else. You change one small thing back in time, can change your life and everyone else's life.
Alright. Sam, what did you pick?
Back to the Future, so it doesn't need any introduction.
Oh, are you sure?
Positive.
Okay.
Everyone's saying it.
Alright, start the count. Alright, Joe, you state your point for butterfly effect.
Or just...
Yeah, you guys can go at it. Yes, do it.
Okay, so I think it's, on release, got somewhat critically maligned. I think that's because it's not a particularly fashionable film to like. It's a time travel film with Ashton Kutcher in this kind of peak 70s show. I don't think it was taken particularly seriously. And rewatching it last night for the first time in quite a while, I think it's got an interesting angle. It's for me, a lot about trauma, and it's kind of a fantasy about the idea of being able to go back in time and change that trauma, never having gone through that, and all the people you love having also gone through that, which is an interesting angle, and actually I think pretty quite before its time in the fact that it was 15 years ago now, which seems crazy to me. And it's taking these ideas quite seriously. It's not particularly afraid to be dark, and I really like it about that. I think it's great at explaining different timelines without becoming too complex and being too broad. And some people criticise it for having plot holes that you could drive a truck through, but I don't think you can get away with any time travel film not having plot holes that large. And I think the way the basic premise moves with the butterfly effect of everything changing, it keeps it narrow within the field of its few characters that it's focused on, that the main character, the protagonist Ashton Kutcher, is trying to change those people's lives. And so it makes sense that those are the people's lives that are changing, and he's still involved in them in some way, or he's hunting them down to keep on checking.
Alright, Sam.
I mean, the idea of a serious time travel film is, in some people's minds, probably the best type of time travel film. Now, I don't believe that personally. I believe it should be light-hearted, it should be fun, and it should look at advancements in technology which Back to the Future 2 does. The depiction of the future and the advancements, when realistically we're only looking at between 85 and 2015, we're looking at obtainable elements of technology which has provided the internet with so many articles of what did Back to the Future get right, what did Back to the Future get wrong. It doesn't really highlight the plot. The plot itself is kind of a retread of Back to the Future 1 with some glaring omissions. But at the same time, we're looking at a very easy watch, something that's accessible to the whole family, something that you can turn your brain off to. But it really highlights not only the reality of the future and the past, but also looks at the chaotic dystopia, which is kind of brought into play with the second act with Biff. I think that any type of film directed by Robert Zemeckis obviously has its traditional tropes that he employs in every film. I think with this, yes, it is a summer blockbuster film, a quintessential 80s film, well obviously the latter end of the 80s anyway, 89, but I believe that it's the best possible type of film just because you can watch it from today and have an understanding of their premise of the future. If you watch it from an audience's perspective in 89, you have a premise of the future. Most people, obviously, when they watched it, would have been children or young adults and can clearly see the technological advancements. We're here and we can watch that film with kind of looking back at time, and we can say, well, look, these are attainable. I mean, the advancement of technology alone to make that film, Vista Glide motion control, which comes into play during the big kind of marketable piece where Marty McFly, Michael J. Fox plays four different characters in one scene. Something that was actually shot in a couple of films before that. But it really did provide that sense of scale, which I think a lot of films which touched on time travel didn't really have at that time. I just think when you look at the pop culture psyche at the moment, the hoverboards, the self-lacing trainers, the hydrator scene from when they do the pizza, the touching on Skype calls, the flying cars. Yes, it might sound fantastical, it might be a little bit dull, and it might not touch upon the heavy themes that the Butterfly Effect does, but I think that when we're looking at the future, we have to have it with a pinch of salt, and we have to look at the film as a film and say, you know what, this is just meant to be a little bit of a laugh, meant to be pretty fun.
All right, go out, kill each other now.
Yeah, so I think those are all really good points, Sam. But they're good points about its depiction of the future and what it gets right, gets wrong. Mm-hmm. But for me, the question is about time travel in it and how it uses time travel rather than its depiction of the future and how it views that. And for me, the Butterfly Effect is better because it's more contained. I think some of Back to the Future 2's uses of time travel kind of get away from itself a bit and use quite similar tropes in terms of find a sports betting thing or find a manual or find the winning lottery tickets, and it's a little obvious for me. What I like about the Butterfly Effect is that it is small and contained, and it tries to keep itself within there, and there are kind of little things within it, like at one point when Ashton Kutcher is on a different timeline and he's himself again, one of the characters says, you're completely different, you walk different, your accent is different, and it's these little things I think it's so good at picking up that you as a conception of yourself would be completely different, rather than in Back to the Future 2 you're seeing different versions of yourself, if that's making sense.
Alright guys, when I wrap up is that if the final minute, your final 30 seconds, your final 30 seconds, your final 30 seconds.
Final 30 seconds. I love the Butterfly Effect. I think it's not afraid to be dark. I think its use of time travel is brilliant, and then it keeps it narrow. That's pretty much it.
Alright. Sam.
Back to the Future 2 is the quintessential time travel film. It looks at the past, it looks at the future. I know you said earlier about it being contained. I think they only touched on 3 different timelines. I think that the film maybe gets a bad rap because of its hokiness. But again, it's just one of the best films, I think, certainly in the Back to the Future franchise, and definitely a pop culture icon.
All right, thank you guys. That was a good debate. It was quite tense there, because it's quite neck and neck. I'm gonna go on to the judges. Tommy.
Okay, so I love both films. But Sam, Joe was absolutely right. That's what I was writing down when you were talking. Is the question isn't the best depiction of the future. If it was, you would have won. But you missed out so much. You missed out familial relationships. You missed out him growing up. You were specifically on the technology, and you only went into the other parts in your roundup, which wasn't enough time. Whereas Joe gave a better picture of why it is the best time travel film. So I'm gonna have to go with Joe.
I just want to say wow and well done to both of you. Bloody hell. So Joe, you picked the Butterfly. Both films that you guys picked, I've seen both, but I haven't seen both of them in quite a while. So for me, I was kind of thinking which one of you makes me want to watch, like, your film. And Butterfly Effect, you said, you know, how time can change who you are, how you walk, how you talk. That I found very interesting. You said it was more contained, which is good, which means it's probably easier to watch. Back to the Future, you said that you feel that it should be light-hearted, fun. You talked about the advanced technology. You kind of summarised what the film is and then what our society is today and kind of linked the two. And I found interesting about the bit where you said 4 different characters in one scene. For their time, you know, that would have been like a really pretty good scene. I am going to give the point to Sam.
Right. It's one. Okay, that's one each from the judges. But I have to give my point. Again, this is really tough. You guys were equally as good in your points. I like when Joe mentioned about trauma, how the film was before its time, not afraid to be dark, because I feel like at that point, before the Butterfly Effect, most people remember time travel films being Back to the Future, so it brought a different scope to it. But I also like how Sam mentions Back to the Future, as Simeon mentioned, advanced technology, easy watch, accessible, it's pop cultural reverence. The hoverboard, that was a thing for like a few moments, a cup of coffee. It is hard. I wish I had like a few more seconds, because even now I'm just kind of like, it's kind of like a meter going back and forth, because I don't know who to give it to. Based on the discussion of time travel itself, mostly I have to go with Joe. But it was close enough. It was so close, you didn't understand. It was just like back and forth. But I'm going to give Joe the point for that one.
Round 2. Fight.
Alright guys, that was a heavy round. I hope you guys are ready for round 2. Round 2 is Best Trilogy. We're going to go with the winner of round 1. So Joe, what did you pick?
I picked the Before trilogy, so that is Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight.
Alright, you can just say a little bit about it, and
Yeah.
I'm going to pass on to Sam for his one.
So, vague spoiler warning for anyone watching at home who hasn't seen them. The first film centres around Jesse and Celine, so they're 2 people who meet whilst equivalent of interrailing, and Jesse says to Celine, you know, why don't we get off this train and spend the night together, wandering around Vienna, then we can, you know, I've got a train to catch. Second one is they meet each other again in Paris after Jesse has written a book about this encounter. And the third one is another 9 years later, and they are together and they have kids, and you know, they have a night away from the kids and things kind of fall apart.
Alright, thank you. So Sam, what did you pick?
I have picked the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy.
Alright, so do you want to say a little bit about the trilogy?
I mean, a hugely successful franchise with Christopher Nolan at the helm. You know, starts with Batman's origin story, Batman Begins, and then kind of goes all the way through to The Dark Knight Rises. There's not much I really can say.
Alright, start the timer, let's start this debate. Go.
Myself?
Oh yeah, let's start, let's do this.
Yeah. Alright, so I love these films. I think they take one of the first boxes of a truly great trilogy. There's no duff or mediocre entry. There's not, oh, the first 2 are great, but the third one isn't so, or the middle one kind of lacks, but it picks up on the third one. They're all brilliant. Each film kind of ties into each other. They obviously got similar themes. The first one is about kind of that first love where you meet someone and kind of fall head over heels for them, but never see them again. The second one is when they're in their early 30s and they're full of regret and they're not quite sure where they're going, and they're trying to catch up with each other. And the third one is when the realities of being with someone for 9 or 10 years, and there's the tensions there, and the what ifs, and are you with the right person, and possibly the romance is gone. They tie into each other they're all set in different European places. The first one's in Vienna. They wander around, and this actually ties into what is great about them is they're very personal films. They're basically two people talking most of the time, but they're shot beautifully. They capture both Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, who I didn't mention before, the two leads, but also the cities as well, and they really tie it in together. I think what really works well with time. Anyone who's familiar with Richard Linklater, he's obsessed with time. You've got Boyhood is probably the one you think of the most. A film filmed over the course of 12 years into one kind of hour and a half, 2 hour feature. This is a really interesting way of using time within a trilogy. If each film is semi-real time, especially the second one, but a genuine 9 years between each one.
All right, Sam. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, kind of going last round, I thought I'd pick something that really had a massive impact within the pop culture industry, and definitely was at the forefront of movie developments kind of very, very recently in the last year or so. The Dark Knight trilogy is obviously a darker retelling of the Batman origin story. Obviously, it has such a thoughtful approach to the superhero genre in general. You're taking the first Batman film since kind of the early to mid 90s that wasn't a popcorn flick. It had a very, very interesting approach to the Bruce Wayne tragedy that we all know, and then it actually turns it up a notch and deals with, in my personal opinion, is the perfect metaphor for the 5 stages of grief. Anyone that doesn't know, obviously, Batman Begins is obviously the retelling of the tragedy, but then looks at establishing Bruce Wayne, who's played by Christian Bale, as a very young, vengeful human being, and really looks at the themes of humanity quite well, justice and revenge. And obviously we know that Batman evolves past that, but it's brilliant that the first film is dedicated to that. There's no rushing with the pacing. The pacing's perfect. Yes, there are kind of tacked-on villains you'd normally get as a trope in superhero films, but they kind of it's more about the personal development. I think a good trilogy, any good trilogy, has character development. And yes, we can talk about duds in films, you stated that quite clearly. But what I would say is if the character development has a satisfying ending, a satisfying conclusion, which I think The Dark Knight Rises does, even though maybe it's not the strongest of the trilogy, will ultimately have a conclusive, competent ending. I think when you look at The Dark Knight Rises, yes, what we get maybe from people talking about Bane, played by Tom Hardy, his depiction, is quite campy, quite reminiscent of the 80s films. But you look at the ensemble, you look at Michael Caine's performance. Michael Caine steals the show in that film, and you finally get that acceptance. You get that denial, you get that anger, but there is that acceptance at the end. And I think every good trilogy needs that perfect conclusion that kind of ties everything up, and we get that character development from Christian Bale's Batman, and we also get that through Michael Caine as well, going from someone who was a meek, mild butler to them being a huge force within Bruce Wayne and Batman's life, and realistically trying to get him to stop while he's ahead. And that, and Dark Knight Rises deals with the realism of terrorism, something that is kind of at the forefront of the human psyche. And we've not even talked about Dark Knight, one of the first films that ever got nominated for an Oscar, performance Oscar, with Heath Ledger being posthumously awarded. The scale, it's bigger, it's darker, it's multi-layered, with so many subplots and new characters. These characters we're getting invested in. Yes, we look at Batman, but we've also got Harvey Dent as Two-Face. We're also looking at these other villains, and we're seeing why they're doing these things. What are their wants, their needs, their haves, their have-nots. That Gotham is depicted in such a different way to any other superhero film, and now we're seeing that within the Avengers Endgame. We're seeing these darker superhero films that hadn't been touched, hadn't been done since The Dark Knight.
Can I come in?
Yeah.
All right. So, first off, Dark Knight is one of my favourite films, and I think you're absolutely right that it changed the superhero game forever. I don't think people took them seriously enough. I don't think Marvel films would have had the success they had if The Dark Knight, in particular, had come out. I think the question is whether it works as a trilogy. I think as 3 separate films, they will work. And you could say Batman Begins and The Dark Knight Rises work as an arc in between. But I think a slight weakness as a trilogy it has is its best entry, I think, The Dark Knight in the middle, doesn't have some of the similar themes.
Alright guys, we have to wrap it up. You guys each got 30 seconds to state your points, your final points.
Alright, so if we're talking about character development, I think it's incredibly hard to replicate character development when you have a genuine 9 years in between where the actors can grow, they can bring their own stuff in. The actors were credited on the script of the second and third films because they were lived in. I think that the Dark Knight trilogy is great, but the stories in the first and second one seem quite separate to the third one.
Okay.
The first and third one seem different to the second one, the kind of Ra's al Ghul, Bane stuff. I don't think it works quite coherently as a trilogy. Great films, as a trilogy, I don't think they work. I think the before films are wonderful, beautiful.
Alright, Sam.
The Dark Knight trilogy, I think encapsulates everything what a trilogy needs to be. It's the classic good versus evil story, and we're looking at a hero's journey. I think that's what we're missing out on. I know you've said, obviously, we're looking at singularity in terms of films, but the classic hero's journey doesn't require, the same evil villain. It requires, the personal demons within. And I think that film, regardless whether you look at them as a 1, 2, or 3, or the whole 3 of them, they deal with the same elements.
Thank you very much. That was a good round. Again, very tough. I'm gonna start with Simeon.
I just want to start off and say I hate you guys. Joe, I just find you fantastic. Sam, I could have a high sugar level and you could still make me eat chocolate. Mate, so many good points. I like the fact that, the Before trilogy, you said that it's shot beautifully and in the different cities, about the romance. I love the fact that it's semi-real time. I feel that that's really hard to do, and not a lot of people have done it and still, and done it very well. Dark Knight, before you even mentioned anything about it, I wrote stars and put a little bubble around it. And as soon as I finished it, you started talking about the stars and the great actors. And the character development both of you have said. I like the fact that you said, Sam, about getting behind the characters and the villains and finding out why they do the things they do. And I think that that's very hard for someone to kind of show and make an audience feel empathy or sympathy towards a villain. My point goes to Sam.
Round point for Sam. Tommy.
I don't want to.
You have to. We all have to. It's tough, but we have to. That's what we're here.
This is really close because every time one of you spoke, I was just like, oh, the point's definitely going to them. And now you're both finished, and I've got a list of points that you guys have brought up. I don't know. So I'm just going to have to go with my gut. I haven't actually watched the Before trilogy, but judging by what Joe has said, it is cohesive and it's telling a real story. Dark Knight, he had a point that the second act probably didn't work as a whole, probably didn't aid the whole overall storyline, other than Rachel dying, which you probably should have come back with. So I'm going to have to go with Joe.
And Joe, okay, again, you guys putting it back on me. You guys are not nice. Alright, again, great debate between you two. I like the fact that Joe mentioned there's no mediocre entry and how it's about growing up and aging. We see the journey of two protagonists from when they first meet, and then the second one when they reunite, and then the third one they have children. And like Simeon mentioned before, it's quite tough to do, especially Richard Linklater. He tends to do films where it's about people talking, and he always does a good job, because any other hands with a lesser director would be rubbish. I like the fact when Sam mentioned about Bruce Wayne's journey, he said something that I've never heard anyone say before. How it's like the perfect case of 5 stages of grief. And also you go from the first film, he's angry at the world, and then you get to the third one, you see him raising a glass to Alfred in the end, which kind of finishes the trilogy. I like to talk about themes of humanity, rushing and pacing, the character development, the realism of terrorism. Because of that, I have to go with Sam. Sam, you get the point right there. It was a tough round. Oh, guys.
Final round fight.
Alright, guys. I ain't gonna lie, I'm feeling very sweaty. It's very tense. You guys have been going at it. You guys are neck and neck. But now it's time for the wild card round, which is about to flip everything on its head. You have been given any questions in advance, but I'm gonna give it to you right now. The wild card question is, excluding the Terminator films 1 and 2 and Predator, what is the best Arnold Schwarzenegger film? You've got a minute to think. The minute starts now. Yes, you can't use the internet, you have to just write notes on your phone. I've got
to know.
Right.
One eternity later.
And time. Okay guys, we're gonna go with the winner of the last round, which is Sam. Sam, what did you pick as the best Arnold Schwarzenegger film, excluding the Terminator 1 and 2 films and Predator?
I went with Total Recall.
Okay, your minute starts now.
Total Recall, futuristic setting, touches on mining and cultural appropriation, looks at the very, very modern issue of sustainability within a film. I think it's actually a lot more artsy than people give it credit for. Some really good twists and turns. I think Schwarzenegger brings a very action film performance in, but obviously that's what he's known for. He's typecasted in these roles. I think that there is a really good twist into the film. When you do discover kind of the fundamentals about the brain, scanning and kind of that aspect to it. But I mean, yeah, also there's a really good idea of cultural infighting between cultures based on who they are and where they stand in hierarchy situations. So looking at monetary values, haves and have-nots as well. I think that for a film that is an action film, it actually touches a lot more on political standpoints.
And time. That's good. Joe, what did you go with?
It's a bit unusual, hopefully you allow it, Pumping Iron. So it's a documentary about Arnold Schwarzenegger and the weightlifting community in 1979. It's basically Arnie at his peak. It's his last ever Mr. Universe before he moves into the acting world with Conan and stuff. And it's a brilliant Arnie film. So it's a wonderful narrative. It's Arnie versus Lou Ferrigno. If you guys don't know him, goes on to play the Hulk. And you can see all the things that make Arnie great. He is as cool as a customer. Lou Ferrigno is bigger, younger, probably should win, but Arnie completely psychs him out. You can see his route to politics, and he's actually a really intelligent, clever, articulate man. And I think you're talking about best Arnold Schwarzenegger film. It's brilliant. You see him in a completely different light. If you're excluding Terminators and Predator, I can't think of anything else than Pumping Iron.
All right. Okay. Is that your final point?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And time. Again, judges, man, help me out. Tom him.
I don't think we're ever going to be inviting you back on the show because it's too difficult. Like, even the wild card, you had a minute to think. Yeah, you still kept. We were thinking about it for a while. We could only come up with Jingle All the Way.
And don't forget the kindergarten cop.
The kindergarten cop, obviously. I really don't. Can I say it's a tie?
No, you can't. We have to vote. It's hard. I know it's hard, but we have to.
I'm gonna go for Sam.
All
and
right.
I don't know why, but because you're both.
Oh, you should have said I don't know why. You should have stuck where you're going.
And I think it's because you hit Total Recall. I think.
You think? Talk, babe.
You need to do better.
Talk, babe. You need a timeout.
I need a timeout. I love the fact that you managed to do it on Total Recall, but still talk about politics, cultural appropriation, and segregation. That's why.
It's not that artsy of a film.
Simeon left the building. Alright, Total Recall. Key points that I wrote down: social justice, action, fundamentals of the brain, modern issues of sustainability, and then Pumping Iron. All the things that makes Arnold great. You see him in a different light. My answer, I'm going to give my point to Total Recall.
Is there any point in me saying anything?
I think you should because we have to.
Well, you mean I don't really have to. You know what I mean?
No,
Like-
upset.
oh, okay, no, okay, but no, literally, I was kidding. Joe, that is very smart, because under, I think any other debater, they would have went with Jingle All the Way or Kindergarten
I was gonna go with Twins.
or True Lies.
I literally wrote Twins down. I was like, Danny DeVito, I'm sick of it.
Kind of annoying.
But you both each picked great films after the ones I excluded. Pumping Iron's a great documentary film. Yes, documentaries do count. It is a film. I think I'm gonna go with, because the points that's mentioned, because he mentioned a lot of points, I'm gonna go with Sam because he mentioned a lot more points. That's the only reason why. It's a toss up. Two great films. It's just that in that short minute, it literally was, and you had some great stuff there. But I think if it was like a longer debate, who knows? But the winner of today's episode and the winner of this Master Debater Cup, Sam Jude.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And
Cheers,
Joe,
mate.
Joe, you're great. I mean, listen,
Get in.
this was intense, guys. Socials. You got any social things you want to plug? Anything coming up? Any projects you want to plug to the viewers?
There's going to be a bar opening in Hornchurch Town Centre in the Borough of Havering called Restart Bar. It will be my own bar. If you could make it down and maybe bring this, I can do you a discount. There you are.
Joe.
My podcast, Everyone's a Critic, Late Night Niche. I don't know when this will be going out, but Who Do You Think You Are, which I work on, might still be on iPlayer. Watch that. I worked on all the episodes of the last series. And my Twitter is @JoeSamSteve. Joe spelled just J-O.
Don't worry, that all the socials is like down here, so like a lower third. I'm probably like touching it.
My social's down here.
I'm probably like punching it as well. It's like, yeah. Okay. Please like, share, subscribe. Take care, and don't forget, that's Debatable, Debater Show on YouTube.
Well, I'm really surprised, to be honest with you. I thought I was going to lose. Quite pessimistic about it.
What are you going to do now?
Probably go into the 5 stages of grief that Sam mentioned.
No, it's just, I think I just got lucky, to be honest with you.